As a reminder, last week we did go 10-4 in the money line. That puts us in 94-41 on the money line on the year through 9 weeks. Last year there were more games because there were less buys. So last year, midway for the season, we were 92-46 in the money line. In best bets this year, we are 29 for 45, which is 64%. Last year, through 9 weeks, we were 26 and 45, so 3 games better. In bets, we went 4 for 5 last week. We're going to try to have a 5 for 5 week this week. I am going to be taking 4 favorites, and I'm going to be taking one underdog. Same thing I did last week. It's been a favorite week the last couple of weeks. There are some lines I like that are smaller. The big lines this week, which I picked a couple of big ones last week. Rams minus 14.5 against the Saints. Chargers minus 9.5 against the Titans. Ravens minus 7.5 against the Dolphins. I'm mostly going to stay away from those this week. One of those big lines is the Denver Broncos. They're going to host the Las Vegas Raiders. That's the Thursday night game. Denver is favored by 9.5. I am going to stay away from the betting side of things. I think Thursday night games been weird this year. Listen, the Raiders only have one good legitimate weapon, really, and it's Brock Bowers. I think Ashton Genty is going to struggle behind that Raiders offensive line against that ferocious Denver defensive line, which the Broncos, as unimpressive as they have been, and I've said Bo Nix has only had 6 good quarters of this NFL season, they've given up the least amount of sacks, and they have the most amount of sacks. That carries. They're starting to get R.J. Harvey more involved in the offense. Listen, Denver is 7-2. They've been an unimpressive 7-2, though. It's possible that they hear the kind of crap talk that I've been giving them, and they come out and they beat down the Raiders, who've struggled in their other 2 divisional games this year. Week 2 at home against the Chargers. That was on a Monday night. And then obviously a couple weeks ago at Kansas City. Listen, I think that they need to force Geno Smith to turn the football over. I think if you take away Brock Bowers, you take away the entire Raiders offense. Again, could Ashton Genty go wild and make it a close game? Sure. But there's also a possibility, like last Thursday night's Ravens Dolphins game, this thing is over midway through the third quarter. Now, we're going to talk about major trade deadline acquisitions as we get into these games. One of them, as we go across the pond to Germany, is the Sauce Gardner acquisition. Indianapolis here is favored by 6.5, so almost a touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons, which kind of crazy to me that they're favored by 6.5 when it's on a neutral field. I think these international games, I said about the London games, I'll say it about Germany. I'll say it next week when we get Commanders Dolphins in Spain, which no, I don't think anybody wants to watch, and no, I don't think I will be betting that game at all. Um, I think they're weird. I think anything could happen. I think Atlanta at 3-5, I think their season's on the line, but I think the Colts now, at 7-2, they're a desperate football team. And I say that because people think they're fraudulent. People don't think Denver's fraudulent at 7-2, but they do think the Colts are fraudulent at 7-2, and I think the Colts have looked better all the way around this year than the Denver Broncos. And the acquisition of Sauce Gardner was obviously after the Kenny Moore, their one weakness of outside cornerback. I don't know if 2 first-round picks is going to make as big of an impact as the Colts think they are. They obviously think that they can go on and win the Super Bowl this year. I just can't see Daniel Jones beating the possibility of Josh Allen and or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes in 2 playoff games to get to the Super Bowl. And it's also telling you the Colts believe that Daniel Jones is their franchise quarterback. They're going to move on from Anthony Richardson, that he is the next Baker Mayfield, he is the next Sam Darnold, he has found the reclamation project, which is all fine and dandy. Again, I can understand 1 first-round pick at this point for Sauce Gardner, maybe not 2, but the new ownership in Indianapolis is trying to do this for the late Jim Irsay. And for Atlanta, they've had good wins this year. Obviously, Minnesota on Sunday night, they beat Buffalo, but then they've also lost to Carolina. They got shut out by them, and they are now third in the NFC South division when some people picked them to win the division this year. Michael Penix has not taken the leap that some thought he would in year two. The season here is obviously on the line for Atlanta, who blitzes a lot with those two rookies, Javon Walker out of Georgia and then James Pierce out of Tennessee. With Jeff Ulbrich running that defensive coordinator show, you expect for them to try to stop Jonathan Taylor and force Daniel Jones to beat you for the air. I want the Colts to win this game, but I'm not going to take the bet. One of the games I won't take to bet is the Browns. I'm actually unbelievably taking a favored Cleveland Browns team who, yes, is starting Dylan Gabriel. I would have not bet this game, but the Jets traded away Sauce Gardner, as we already mentioned. They traded away Quentin Williams to the Dallas Cowboys, who gave up almost as much ammo to get Quentin Williams than they did when they traded away Micah Parsons. Yes, they have two good interior defensive tackles to do a better job at stopping the run. I don't know what that means for the Dallas Cowboys moving forward because I still think they're an average, 6-7 win football team. Kevin Stefanski has given play calling to Tommy Reese over the bye week. Now, I don't think that's going to make a difference. And no, the Browns don't have the best weapons in the world. And I said it last night on Championship Rings to my debate partner, Josh Unger, who is a fan of the Cleveland Browns. I said, you know, the Jets had old, expensive defensive pieces who were somewhat young, obviously, in Sauce Gardner and Quinn Williams, but they weren't going anywhere. The Browns had two defensive pieces in Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward that they could have dumped off. They decided not to, and here they are. So the Browns defense is struggling on the road this year. Obviously, the Jets still have Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall, but I do think that those trades took a lot out of that locker room. I think the players know and feel the season's basically over. I'm not going to say they're going to weigh down and quit, but I think this is a Browns team where Kevin Stefanski is fighting for his job. Okay, so the Carolina Panthers last week were 12.5 point dogs to the Green Bay Packers. And we said it was a trap game for the Green Bay Packers, and the Panthers came in there on the road and got their biggest win in years. Well, on that emotional high now, I could see a letdown from the Carolina Panthers. And they're taking on their arch rival, their division rival, New Orleans Saints, who are terrible. They only have one win. They beat the Giants at home. The Panthers are favored by 5.5, which when will that ever happen anytime soon? And I could just see the Saints keeping this close. I could even see the Saints somehow pulling off an upset win. This game makes me a little bit nervous. Tyler Shoaff in his second start, also his second career road start. I think Dave Canales is going to try to tell his team, hey, don't do what the Packers did last week and give the Saints an opportunity to win the game. But I think there could be a natural letdown here. Yes, they gave up Raheem Shaheed at the trade deadline to the Seahawks, but the Saints already know they're a bad team. I think they're going to try to not get the number one pick, at least the players from that standpoint. So I like Carolina, though, to win the game. Then, this is my second bet on the board. I like Tampa. Coming off a bye, they're favored by 2.5. I think they go into New England and win. And I think New England's been taking advantage of the Saints, the Browns, the Titans. Yes, they had a nice win against Atlanta last week, but they struggled in the second half. And Drake May has been sacked 12 times in the last 2 weeks. It's the one weakness for New England is their offensive line. I think against a blitzing Todd Bowles, that young quarterback, and Drake May, Todd Bowles is going to have some changeups for Tampa Bay coming out of the bye week. New England has done a really good job at limiting explosive plays, but we saw what Drake London did last week against them. I would not be surprised if a more vertical attack by Emeka Buka gives New England some troubles. We know they've struggled down in Miami in the past, a very similar situation here going down to Tampa. I've been on the Patriots a lot this year. This time I'm on the opposite side. I think the Bucs come back. I think they cover -2.5. Then we have the Baltimore Ravens who are on 10 days rest. They're taking on the Minnesota Vikings. They are favored by 4.5 on the road against the Vikings. And I was considering taking Baltimore in this game. I didn't because both these teams tend to play one possession games a lot, especially the Minnesota Vikings. I think Brian Flores is going to have a plan against Lamar Jackson. I don't know if it's going to be successful. Lamar is not ringing a lot, which until he starts running again is when I will be fully convinced that the Ravens quartet, if you will, is back. But the Vikings are going off a very emotional divisional win on the road at the Lions when they were 8.5 point underdogs. Same theory here as the Panthers. Do they come out flat against a Ravens team who just demolished the Dolphins, but they got business in front of them? This is the second of a third straight road game. They got a division rival next week in the Browns, which be careful about that game. Ravens' third straight road game, possibly two straight wins against the Dolphins, Vikings, and even three straight against the Bears. That could be a letdown spot for Baltimore. But I think here, the talent here, I think that Zach Orr is going to do a good job of confusing J.J. McCarthy. I think by the second half, Derrick Henry and that Lamar Jackson offense is going to wear down the Vikings defense. Minnesota will try to blitz the Ravens. It's not going to work. I'll take the Ravens to win. Then we've got the Bills at the Dolphins, a rematch of week 3 on that Thursday night game. And the Dolphins traded away Jaden Phillips to the Philadelphia Eagles at the trade deadline. I love that move for Howie Roseman, only giving up a third round pick. For the Dolphins, they also tried to give away Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, they were trying to give away players. They know they're not a great football team. Buffalo, a very emotional game last week. Big win against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Dolphins are a division rival who felt like if it wasn't for that pick by Tua Tagovailoa, could have gone into Buffalo 7 weeks ago and won that game. I think this game could be closer than people think. I think the Dolphins could cover this 9.5 spread. This is very similar to the spread that was in Buffalo in week 3, and the Dolphins covered. I believe it was a 10.5 point spread, and Buffalo won by 10 because of that field goal at the very end. So keep that in mind here. I think the Dolphins are the side. Again, I'm not betting it, but I think the Bills definitely win. Then we've got the Jaguars at the Texans. This is a rematch from week 3 again, where it was 17 to 10. Houston's offense could not really do anything. This just depends on who's playing quarterback for the Texans, whether it's Davis Mills or CJ Stroud. If it's Davis Mills, I would lean towards Jacksonville. Houston is a small favorite at 1.5. That tells me they believe that CJ Stroud could play. And I'm going to go with the Texans here, who I think this will be a battle for second place in the AFC South. Then my next bet here, I don't know why this line's so small. I mean, this should be at least if the Panthers are favored by 5.5 against the Saints. The Bears should be favored by 3.5 against the Giants, who with the injuries to Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterboo are now completely a shell of themselves. Yes, they got embarrassed last week by San Francisco, and you know my rule is typically teams that get embarrassed bounce back, but they got embarrassed back-to-back weeks by the Eagles and by the Niners. And I think the Bears and Ben Johnson are just going to run the football down the throat of the Giants. I think there's going to be a peace day resistance here. I think Dennis Allen's defense is going to do enough against Jackson Dart where they don't have a lot of weapons, unlike Cincinnati that does have T against Jamar Chase and that crew. I think Caleb Williams plays a very good game. I think that after the emotional eye that they got last week against the Bengals, this may be a closer game. It may be a 4 or 5 point game, but at the very least, I expect the Bears should be able to cover 3.5. Then we get to Arizona with Jacoby Brissett, who has now basically almost been confirmed by Jonathan Gannon. He said, yes, Kyler Murray's hurt and Brissett's going to start, but if Kyler was healthy, I would still keep Brissett. So it's a soft benching in Arizona, who we saw this rematch in week 4 on a Thursday night where Kyler Murray led that comeback. Remember, Marvin Harrison 6 weeks ago was coming off all those drops. Um, and he scored that touchdown. It was a very emotional game. And Seattle had to kick the game-winning field goal after Arizona kicked the ball out of bounds at the 40-yard line. There's a lot going on here, but Arizona's had a one-possession game in every single game this year. I think the number for these two teams are too high. Sam Darnold is the number one quarterback by Pro Football Focus. He's got Raheem Shaheed now, another deep threat that you can put with Jackson Smith and Jigba to stretch the defense. But this Arizona team just doesn't quit. They're getting a pass rush now with Josh Sweat, Walter Nolan, Calais Campbell. It's a very interesting divisional matchup here, and Arizona is not afraid to go down to Seattle and play well. I'm picking the Seahawks to win. I think it's too many points with the Arizona Cardinals. I said this about the Packers game a couple weeks ago, where I picked Green Bay to win, but I took the Arizona side of it with the points. I've done well this year in games where I've taken the other team to win, but I've taken the plus the points with the other side. That's what I'm doing here. Then I'll take the Rams, who I think are out for revenge after that Week 5 embarrassing loss to San Francisco when they did not have Pearsall or Ayuk or Brock Purdy or George Kittle. Now they do have George Kittle back for this game, but the rest of the free guys I mentioned sounds like they're not going to play again. San Francisco's had sort of this weird year this year where Brandon Ayuk was supposed to be back by week 6. Still have not activated his practice window. Brock Purdy was only supposed to miss a couple games. Here we are in week 10. It's going to be Mac Jones again. I don't know what's going on in San Francisco with the injuries, and I don't know what to make of them because they lost another edge rusher this week. They're just not the same team that they are. But Kyle Shanahan always gets up for Sean McVay. This is one of the biggest rivalries in the NFL. But I think McVay remembers that horrible play call when they ran up the middle to lose that game 5 weeks ago. I think the Rams are going to be out for revenge. Listen, the Niners may only lose this thing by 3 with the hook. I'm not going to bet it, but I could also see a Rams blowout. Then I think the Lions are going to blow out the Commanders. I think they're angry. I think if you wanted to, which I'm going to do, take the Lions minus 8.5 here. This is the one big line, one big favorite I'll take. I think the Commanders now, the injury to Jaden Daniels, deflating the football team. Marshawn Lattimore is out for the year. Not to mention they can't stop the run. And oh, the Lions just got embarrassed at home by the Minnesota Vikings. They've lost now 2 out of their last 3 games. They lost to Kansas City on prime time. They came back and they looked like a machine against the Bucs, albeit in their building. I think to lose that game the way they did to the Vikings, where their offense did not play that well, Jared Goff struggled, especially in the first half. Their defense, outside of Aiden Hutchinson, could not stop JJ McCarthy and Aaron Jones and those weapons from moving the ball. I think the Lions also remember what the Commanders obviously did to them in the NFC divisional round last year. There is no sympathy here. I think Detroit could lay it on Washington. Then I'll take the Chargers to win. I have no feel about this game. I feel like the Steelers should win this game. I mean, no Joe Alt, no Rashawn Slater, obviously, probably no Mekhi Becton, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith. The Steelers' defensive line should win this game for them. But the Steelers are inconsistent, right? We don't know what we're getting from them week to week. They got embarrassed on Sunday Night Football a couple weeks ago. Maybe Mike Tomlin will remember that. Maybe they'll play well. But I just feel like these are two old school heavyweight fights going at it between Jim Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. It's going to be a very physical, run the football game. I'm sure Jim Harbaugh has called his brother John, asking him what Mike Tomlin usually loves to do and, all that kind of stuff. Um, I think it's a 3 point game. I think it's run on the money, and I'll go with the Vegas recommendation. The Chargers should be favored. Basically, a neutral field game here. I think it's going to be more of a home game for the Steelers, but nonetheless, I'll take the Chargers to win. And then Monday night, for the first time in a long time, since week 2, 8 weeks ago, the Eagles are underdogs. And they're going into Green Bay. And it worries me a little bit that the Packers are coming off that loss to Carolina because I think they will refocus. I think that they will play well. However, I think the loss of Tucker Kraft is huge for this offense moving forward. It may force them to use Matthew Golden, the rookie out of Texas, who has been a no-show as a first-round pick to this point. But the Eagles are coming off the bye. And the other storyline of this game is the Packers are the team that introduced the legislation to ban the brotherly shove. And I think Nick Sirianni, we know how he is. I think the Eagles are going to use it at any point they possibly can. It's going to be a talking point coming out of this game. And I think coming off the bye, we're not the A.J. Brown trade talk can be behind this team. As long as the offensive line is healthy, you get Saquon Barkley going. Green Bay has really struggled running the football this year in terms of yardage. Josh Jacobs as well as Saquon Barkley. Obviously, both have had not the years they had a year ago, but the addition of Jalen Phillips, and we'll see what Jair Alexander has left in that defensive backfield with the potential return of Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham now back off the edge. This could be a whole new look for an Eagles defensive line who started to get out of the pass rush a couple weeks ago against the New York Giants. I think those edge rushers will be helped by Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis inside. Green Bay's been using Micah Parsons more as a linebacker this year. He's had success against the Eagles early in his career in Dallas. I think this is a game that comes down to the wire, but I think ultimately my Eagles find a way to pull it out in their quest to become the number one seed once again in the NFC. So to recap, I have Denver over Las Vegas. I have Indy over Atlanta in Germany. I have Cleveland over the Jets. Carolina over New Orleans. Tampa over New England. Baltimore over Minnesota. Buffalo over Miami. Houston over Jacksonville. Chicago over the Giants. Seattle over Arizona. The Rams over the Niners. Detroit over Washington. The Chargers over Pittsburgh. And Philadelphia over Green Bay. My five best bets for week 10 of the 2025 NFL season are I like the Browns. Now that the Jets are tanking, I like the Browns to cover 2.5 here in New York. I think Tampa coming off their bye can cover 2.5 as well. They take on the Patriots at home. I am the Bears at home, cover 3.5 against a Giants team that may be going down into the cellar. My one underdog. I like Seattle to win this game, but I think the way Arizona's played this year, yes, they're coming off an emotional Monday night game against Dallas, but Arizona's been in one possession games every single game this year. I think they cover the 6.5. And then I think my one blowout this weekend is Detroit, who is going to be angry after that loss at home to the division rival Minnesota. Washington deflated after the injury to Jaden Daniels. Detroit covers 8.5. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.